Hi there, this is Sifu Slim, and I am delighted today to have a learned individual, so learned that Sensei Don is going to share with us some really important information about how to handle conflict, adversity, arrogance, overreaction, all these things that we come across in our daily lives. And a lot of it's useful that comes from the martial arts. So in martial arts, you become advanced belts. You know, you start out with white belt, and each time that you're approved to pass on, you become a more advanced belt. And then when you finally become a black belt, they say you're ready to begin the journey. So isn't that interesting? It's a long road to this mastery of your emotions, of your physicality, of your ability to teach others. So I'm going to bring in Sensei Don Lewis from across the United States in Virginia, a place very near and dear to me. Sensei Don, share with us a little bit about your background.
Um, I first started martial arts when I was 8 years old. That was back in 1956. And nobody really knew what karate or judo was when you told them that's what you were doing. But I studied it off and on a variety of different systems. Went to college and taught at the University of Richmond, where you attended, of course, and taught at the University Judo Club there, set that up and taught it. My major was psychology with a specialty in physiological psychology, which is the physical causes of behaviors, both internal and external. You know, how do we get afraid? How do we get angry? How do we know we're hungry, thirsty, all that sort of stuff. I also had 20 hours of biology. And so I had a real interest in the physiology of violence, and then went on through, got a master's of divinity. So I kind of looked at the theological, ethical, those sorts of things. Went on to get a PhD, and my wife also has one in human sexuality, which they all seem like they're very disparate topics, and in some ways they are, but they all actually relate to almost the same area of the brain. So when we talk about dealing with altered states, when we talk about fear, all of that, they all kind of interrelate, believe it or not. And so they're all kind of in that context. I spent 6 years as an intelligence agent in the field with a fair amount of, most of the time it was boring. Occasionally there were some exciting moments to it, where I began to understand what would and would not work. And so while I was still working, and then after I resigned and left after the 6 years, I met with a group of other black belts from a variety of systems. Some were corrections officers, police officers, I had a few spec ops, another intelligence person, and so on. And none of us liked everything that we learned from our systems, and we knew there was a lot of problems. So what we did was we just basically started off saying, what are all the attacks? How would you defend? What do you know? What do we know? Oh, that one sucks. Let's get rid of it. Let's look at the next one. And went on to things that would work. And then ultimately, I decided to start my own system, Woboco Jiu Jitsu, which was just a self-defense Jiu Jitsu, straight out for street and combat. It's not pretty unless you like efficiency and effectiveness, in which case it's got some nice stuff. So that's kind of an overall background. I taught until I was in my 50s, taught predominantly civilians, but I also taught instructors for Israeli defense, German commandos, SEALs, Marine Recon, and Spec Forces. So I've had kind of a wide range of experiences there.
So the physiological side that you talk about is fascinating to me. When you see a kid running amok in a supermarket, for example, the biochemistry is out of whack, and that can set the parents or the older siblings into another reaction. We've got fight, flight, and freeze, and I'm sure you know a lot of other ways to group those impulses, and they're uncontrollable, many of them. At least that's what it seems. Maybe you can share with a little bit about how that brain and that biochemistry works, and some of the things that we see in our normal walk of life.
The most basic emotion that we have, and emotions are basically a collection of nerve and endocrinological responses. So if you have one set of them over here, you say, oh, I really like that person. You have another set over here, you say, I'm hungry. You have another set over here and you're afraid. And fear is the most basic one. And that makes sense, because if we didn't have fear of things happening that were threatening to us, we wouldn't exist as a species or as individuals. So what occurs is when anything that's new theoretically begins to become a little frightening, unless we have grown up in a home where newness is something that's celebrated. But even then, that fear is an inborn response. And so when that happens, we get adrenaline pouring out. We get cortisol, which is a danger hormone, and that kicks off everything else. It affects a part of the brain, sections of the brain called the limbic system together, and they all factor in there. And Sifu, as you know, in teaching classes and working with people, they have sometimes that triggers without any warning. And the basic response to fear is a momentary freeze, although some people will freeze for a long period of time. But in the best circumstance, it'll be a momentary freeze, and then you move into action. Once you have fear, the only way to break out of that sitting still is to have another set of hormones and neurological responses kick in. And that one we call anger. So it's actually impossible to be angry without first being afraid. And what we want to do is not try and get rid of fear. That would be dumb. You need to have the fear for a variety of things. But we want to learn how to control that fear, and particularly how to control that anger. And so one of the things I did, Sifu, was to work with people on how to de-escalate their own emotional state and how to de-escalate someone else's emotional state, hopefully. Although if you're really good at that, you maybe got a 50-50 chance. If they want to get mad, they're going to get mad. If you're lousy at it, it's 100% that they're going to get mad. So that's kind of where we come from on it. If somebody comes out of an alley at you with a knife, you should be afraid. That's a good response. But what we don't want to do is lead a fearful life where we're afraid of everything all the time.
That's not an uncommon sight to witness in our normal ongoings around our communities, to hear people that are complaining or in the dread state, or they've just got so much going on. It would, they seem to be overwhelmed, and that could be one side of the person. Then you meet people who might be a pastor, a priest, a teacher, and they're surrounded by things that could be perceived as bad news and chaos, yet those people come across as a peaceful person. And we've talked and read books like Dan Millman's book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can share what experience does to someone who is like a pastor or invested in the art of healing, and how they handle stressful situations and chaos in a different way than the average person might handle it.
I think there's several things that factor in. One is training. I know at when I was in seminary, and I did a lot of specialty area in counseling and all, and went on to become a therapist eventually. Over and over, we dealt with our own death. And we would bring in tapes of us counseling somebody or whatever, And I remember one time they said, well, this person is clearly upset that they have cancer, and they're afraid that they're going to die. And yet you avoided that topic. Every time they brought it up, you changed the subject. And I went, I don't think so. And they went, oh yeah, we counted 9 times. And so you begin, and so they say, so what are you afraid of? What did that trigger in you? How were you responding to that? Why did you not allow them the chance to share about their fears? And so it kind of made you forced you to look at yourself. And I think that's one of the key things, is to be able to reflect at yourself. Anytime you've had some kind of a frightening thing happen, or discouraging thing, or something where you're worried about this, is to take a look at it and say, okay, so now what was it I was really afraid of? What was my fear? What am I looking at? I mean, I'm 74 years old. I've had a lot of injuries. The last 2 years haven't been the best health-wise. Fortunately, nothing super serious, no cancer or heart disease, but it's wiped me out for 2 years. It was not COVID, but it was some other stuff that happened. And I've had to look at that very seriously. I've had 3 eye surgeries since February, trying to keep my sight. I can see large things easily, no problem, but like trying to read a string of emails is difficult for me. My eyes can't focus from here to here to here that fast. They say it'll come back eventually. But in doing that, I have to be able to say, this is scary. It's not a bravado of, well, I can handle this, I'm tough, I can do whatever. It's just a really honest vulnerability of, yeah, I'm getting older and this has failed. The other side of that is to have people that you can trust to work with you. Therapists all have therapists, and pastoral counselors all have pastoral counselors. And there's a reason for that. Sifu, it's sort of like you have, if you're just talking martial arts alone, you have people that you go to talk about your classes, this, that, and the other. I have people that I talk to. We all need those people who can support us, challenge us. I mean, I don't want somebody working with me who isn't going to get in my face and say, you know what, you need to pay attention to this. You're not paying attention to what's going on. My wife's also a therapist, and while you can't be your spouse's therapist, there is a reality that we also can't stop being a therapist. And so there's a sense in which, I can sit down to her and say, this is really scary. I mean, when I first had the problem in February, I was bringing my plate over to sit down at the table with her, and all of a sudden I just stopped and I said, Jane, I don't think I'm having a stroke, but I can't see, and I kind of did a few things and went, okay, I can see out of my right eye, can't see out of my left eye. So we gobbled down dinner and rushed to the emergency room. And the next day I went through an hour and a half of laser surgery, not one of the more uncomfortable things I've ever been through, but was been able to say to her, this is scary. What if they can't fix it? What if it continues to happen? What do I do? Where are we going to go? How's it going to change our life? So I think part of it also, and it's something I learned as an intelligence agent in doing reports back and debriefing things, was to be brutally honest with yourself. Not to say, well, I'm not really bothered by this at all. It's okay if I'm blind. I can handle that. You're an idiot if you think it's okay that you're blind. It's like, no, I've got to deal with this situation, and how do I move from there? So that's one thing that you can deal with. I think meditation is another big one, spending time meditating. And it doesn't have to be 3 hours in a cave, every day. You can do 5 minutes at a time in your front room. Whatever. I know a person who has 5 children. They're all young. They run they're good kids, under control, but they're 5 young kids, and they're all over the house and everything else. And they said, the best meditation time I have is when I go into the bathroom and lock the door and sit on the john. But they also just sit there and put themselves into it. The book I've got coming out shortly, Beyond Technique in the Dojo, The Art of Training Warriors. One of the 6 courses in that book is is called meditation, fast track meditation for busy martial artists. It's how can you spend 5 minutes and get somewhere. The other thing I would say, and this is a very immediate thing to do when you get afraid, and Sifu, I think all of us who teach martial arts know how fast some stuff can come at us. I mean, we know life can hit us hard. If it's not somebody with a knife, it could be that my eye decided to screw up and I can't see out of it. But one of the things that works is called box breathing. It's sometimes called 4x4 breathing. It's sometimes called combat breathing. It's taught to the military. It's taught to police. But basically, you breathe in 4 breaths, hold it for 4 counts, breathe it out for 4 counts, and stay with your lungs empty for 4 counts. And you try to do 4 sets of those. When you see a newsreel of a SWAT team getting ready to enter a room and they're standing there, you usually can't see close enough, but one of the things they're trained to do while they're standing there ready to make that move, they're doing box breathing, because it settles you right on down in, focuses you, and gets your mind from running all over the place and your body going crazy and so on. So that's a couple quick things. There's some other things also we can do, but that's a start at any rate, Sifu.
That would be something we could do right now. If you want to lead us through two of the box breath exercises, that
Sure.
would be nice.
Okay, so what we're going to do is just breathe out. Now, breathe in fully to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it out. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you just take a nice cleansing breath deep and let it out and relax. Now, if you noticed when I did that, my voice got a little lower. That was deliberate on my part, was to move it down a little lower and to move a little slower. And it begins to do that. Physically, there's 2 things you can do. One of which is to drop your shoulders a little bit. That helps you relax. And Sifu, as a martial artist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of people think that puts you in a weak position, but when you drop your shoulders into a relaxed position, you're in a much better position to move fast, defend, and do whatever. The second thing you can do sounds really funny, but if you will let your tongue melt into the bottom of your mouth, and you'll find that the muscles in your neck and shoulder all relax, because they're all interconnected in terms of both the attachments and also the innervation. So when your tongue flattens out, that flattens out. When that happens, your chest drops a little bit, your diaphragm flattens out, and you begin to breathe more naturally and deeper. When we get afraid, we go, I mean, that's the first response you see from people. And they go, and they hold it, and then they're, whereas when you learn to do this, and this will, it's kind of hard to explain here, but any martial arts instructor that teaches anything about breathing with the moves can teach this to someone easily. They do teach it to someone all the time, but like you can take that fast breath in and then instantly move it into motion, so that your body goes naturally, but then you're moving into a block, a grab, a parry, whatever it happens to be. But you translate it into energy. And that's one of the ways of just quickly, when you get into problems like that. As a therapist, I've had people come in the room just terribly upset and crying and sobbing. I've had them come in angry and all that. And the first thing I have to do is say, this is not about me. This is about them. And I hit that box breathing, although they're not aware I'm doing it. But I hit that box breathing, and I'm sitting there listening to them. And then I can move into into a healing space. As a therapist, my job is to be the calm in the midst of the chaos. The storm's moving all around, and I'm the calm center that does not get involved in the drama. At the same time, that's no different than martial arts, where when the other person is all agitated and they're going to attack, we stay calm in the midst of it. Now, I don't know the Chinese word for it. In Japanese, it's called mushin, which is no mind. It means that you just calm and you react. You're just there. You know, there's another phrase with it, moon on the water. It's a reflection of what's there. You're not, okay, if he does this, he'll do this. If he does this, he'll do that. I'll do this, and I'll do, you know, it's just, I'm sitting here, you know. If I live, I live. If I die, I die, you know, but I will, you know, do the best I can do in the midst of this.
That sounds like a great point of focus, Sensei. So you mentioned this is not about me, it's about them. And let's say I'm in an altercation or someone approaching me with a potential violence in mind. If I think of that way there, right in that moment, and I stay relaxed, it's not about me, it's about them. And I get into my Jiu Jitsu relaxation and my awareness, etc., I can ward off, perhaps, with my posture, my breath, my calm,
Right.
a potential aggression on their part. And then if it does get to close proximity, I know a lot of people say walk away, run away. There are times where I think that it warrants somewhat staying your ground in a relaxed way, and maybe taking that person and working with them in some way, you know, reaching out and you know, with a Braveheart handshake that goes like one wrist to one wrist, and intervening in a physical way where, you know, because of your comfortable, relaxed state, you might be able to diffuse it. And if it goes from there, you can put them into your salsa move, your martial arts swing, and hold on to them and maybe talk to them in the ear. I love being in that position where you're wrapped around behind that person. You've got them in a state where they're comfortable and you're comfortable, and you can talk to them and say, you know, say things that fit that situation. Maybe share with you what your thoughts are on that piece of philosophy, Sensei.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you're relaxed, like you're saying, and your positions, your posture, you know, you don't want to this. And like Jane and I, my wife and I taught verbal de-escalation to police officers. It was a 40-hour course on how to deal with people that were agitated, mentally ill, drunk, whatever. And one of the first things we had to do was get them to stop walking up to these people with their thumbs hooked in their gun belt, because that's not going to calm anything down. Just like the phrase, "Oh, just calm down." I mean, that isn't going to do anything but escalate it. But when you have that kind of calm in the midst of it, long before I knew any of this stuff about the physiology and all, I was in high school. And I was coming out of the school, and a guy grabbed me by the shirt front. He was just really ticked at me first. And I know why he was ticked at me, but it wasn't anything I did. It was just he needed somebody to be ticked at, and I was there. and he grabbed me, and he cocked his fist, and I knew how to respond to it physically, but I didn't. And I had been really working on my teacher at the time had me working on an attack and somebody grabbing, and then but you go calm. That your instant response is to be calm, not to go agitated and get into the middle of it all. And I got out of this fight I sat there looking at him for a second, and I just said, "Can I ask you a question?" And he says, "What's that?" And he didn't know what that is. What? And I said, "Do you gamble?" And he says, "Well, yeah." I said, "All right, give me a second." I looked at his hand. I looked around, thought a minute. I said, "I'll give you $5 with 7-2 odds, that doesn't reach my face. And he sat there and he says, well, you're just damn lucky. I don't feel like hitting you right now. And he walked off. Because what happened was I sat there totally calm and he didn't know what to do with that. He was expecting me to cower or expecting me to fight back, but he wasn't expecting me to take him on some off the wall journey somewhere. And that was part of that calm, disconnecting their emotions from their, de-escalating it, letting the air out of the balloon, so to speak.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what your dentist had to say when you shared that story with him.
He was far enough back with his fist, I can pretty well guarantee it wasn't going to hit my face. I was probably going to get hit, but it would have been my shoulder that would have gotten hit and he would have gone down. But yeah, I'm glad it didn't work out that way. I didn't want to have to do that. I've never wanted to fight. That's never been an issue for me, but I've had to many times, but I haven't wanted to. So that brings us to a factor, one other thing to think about. And Sifu, there are 3 ways to respond to any kind of aggression, verbal, whatever else. And one is to be aggressive back. The person goes, listen, I don't like you, and I'm going to, and you turn around and go, yeah, well, your mama, and the two of you get to woofing a bunch, and all that's going to do is escalate. Aggression like that, an aggressive response to any kind of verbal attack is just simply going to get things are going to get more aggressive. The second way is passive / victim, where it's, oh, please don't do that. Now, look, I'm not interested in fighting. Okay. I just really, and you get into that sort of a thing that also draws an attack. And it's actually all physiological. It all happens in the brain, which I'll explain in just a minute. The third way is assertive, and assertive is also called computer mode. And that's what we've been talking about, is disconnecting those emotions so that we're not responding emotionally to their emotions and it all getting bigger and bigger. Because one of the things that I remember reading this experiment when I was in college 50 years ago. They've actually proved that fear is an energy force that transmits across space. That somebody who gets afraid makes everybody else afraid, and most of us have experienced that where we've been in a big room or a group or something, and we really aren't noticing what's going on at the door, and then all of a sudden we just have everything changes in the room because something's gone on somewhere, and simultaneously we all know something's happening, and we feel the fear in us. So what happens in the brain is when any kind of input comes in, so anything comes in, it goes to a section of the brain right down at the very core. It bypasses all the thought processes, nothing's there, and it asks 3 questions, and 3 questions only, and in a certain order. The first question it asks is, can it eat me? And if the answer is yes, we've got a fear response. We got the fight and flight response, where we've frozen. Now we go to fight and or flight. And we respond. And of course, that's where we have to get control of ourselves, to say, I may have to fight or I may respond very quickly. There have been times where I've been attacked out of nowhere and I responded instantly because I didn't have any other choice. That's what I'm going to do if I'm going to live. But I do it as calm as you can be in the midst of being attacked. If the answer to that question, can it eat me, becomes, if that answer is no, then you go to the second question is, can I eat it? Now, we're predators, and we know that because there's a saying in biology, eyes on the side, I hide, eyes in front, I hunt. And all of the prey animals, the cows, the deer, and so on, their eyes are out here, and they get this wide field of vision so they can see things to protect themselves. Predators like us, we have our eyes in front so that we can track in on the prey we're chasing. So if we decide that whatever it is prey, then we go ahead and go into fight and flight. And the third question, which I won't discuss much anymore, but if that question's no, for the first two are no, the third one is, can I have sex with it? And if that answer is correct, is yes, it goes back into the same physiological responses as fight and flight. It's exactly the same. There's just one little spot up here in the brain that makes a decision. Is this fun or is this harmful? And so if it's a good sexual situation, then it's fun and we go for it. But everything else is the same. All the adrenaline, everything that pumps out, all the stuff that occurs is exactly the same. What happens when somebody attacks us is they have looked at it, they've gone, there's my prey. That person's weak. So they've answered the first question, no, it can't eat me. And the second question is, can I eat it? Yeah, that's the one I'm going after. And so what we do, if you get yourself under control and all, what you want to do by being calm is to start throwing the switch back to question one of, yeah, I can eat you. You know, this person may be going, that was part of what happened when I asked the guy, do you gamble? I mean, he's expecting me to be totally afraid. And I go, do you gamble? And he's, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
And it put him then to a point of, oh my God, maybe I'm the prey. And then that puts him wanting to leave. And I gave him a way to leave. If I'd been aggressive to him, it wouldn't have worked. We'd have been in a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we could have been anyway, but.
Yeah. So a couple of things on martial artists. I've met many very talented martial artists and fighters, and rarely have they come across as aggressive people who want to push their weight around. Mm-hmm. And one observation is they've already done that for several hours per day. And they don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
They have a place that they do their pushing with their bodies and their training. And then once they leave that, especially if they've been doing that for a while and they've learned from good teachers, they don't go out looking for trouble. The people looking for trouble are people that are coming from a point of fear, of anger, mm-hmm. of yes. things that are out of place in their home life and their biochemistry. They're not people that were working on a goal of improvement, typically in a fight sport or in a martial arts, et cetera. Maybe share with your thoughts about the people you've known and how if they were arrogant or if they had any bully streaks or not.
I've very rarely seen an upper level martial artist who had any tendencies toward bullying or anything of that sort. Usually that's been worked out of them through that. You know, like you said, and I'm right on, I think you're right on target, Sifu. You know, they've done this activity. They've done all that. They know what it is. They know that they could die. They know how easy it is to die. One of the things I tell people is that one of the problems with the fight is you never know who's going to survive it till it's over. And I don't care how skilled you are, you don't know what's going to happen with it. But there is that sense in which they've been there. Now, our daughter and son, when they were younger, my wife teaches also. She was also a martial artist. And we would take them to the gym where we were teaching a couple nights a week, and they'd do their homework off to the side while we taught the classes. And Carol, one time, our daughter said, she was probably fourth grade, third grade, something like that. And she said, I don't like going there with you and Mommy. And I said, well, what's the matter, honey? And she said, because when the two of you are together doing something, you're mad at each other. And we went, oh, and we had to sit down and explain that Mommy and Daddy weren't mad at each other and we weren't trying to hurt each other, but we were dead serious about what we were doing. You know, when I came out of Jane with a club, there was no joking about this. This was serious business. We did what we did, but you know, it took a while for her to understand that. And then it was like, we finally just said, this is a game, sweetheart. This is not, you've never seen us do this at home, have you? No, well, This is a game that we play here, And so eventually now, of course, she's an adult and is fully aware of it now, but that's part of that, getting rid of it. I have seen a number of bullies who were in the very lower ranks, and people who've come in, and many times we're able to work that out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Sifu, I'm sure you've had the same situation where some people didn't want it worked out of them and they leave class because we won't tolerate it in our classes.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's thankfully very minimal viewing of that sort of behavior. I think the martial arts centers that I've been to, and I've been to probably more than 100 in my life, I think they have, even if they're a combat, even if there's some aggro elements to it, I think it's a sanctuary where there's a structure. And a friend of mine a long time ago told me that children like structure. And I think you can extend that out to people like structure. And they go to church and there's a certain structure there. You go to the car mechanic, there's a certain structure. Home Depot, Costco, wherever you go, there's a structure. And you tend to blend in to that structure, because if you stay outside of that structure and not following the rules, you're going to have altercations throughout the day, and it's not a fun way to go through life. So maybe share with me what your thoughts are on the sanctuary aspect and the structure, and even a discombobulated person with proclivities towards fight and flight and freeze and not following the rules might sense that when they walk into this sanctuary, this dojo, and get in line and start to favor and thrive in that environment.
Yeah, Sifu, I'm not sure what the Chinese word for it is, but dojo in Japanese doesn't, we think of it as a gym in our kind of our way of thinking, but in Japanese, it's also a temple. There's a spiritual component to it. We may be teaching you physical things, but what we're really teaching you is the spiritual control of where you no longer are afraid of everything that comes at you. And you're able to discern when something brand new pops up and those questions pop up, you're able very quickly to say, okay, this is danger and I need to deal with it. Or, oh, this is something I could enjoy. This is something I love. This is something that's beautiful. This is something that, or maybe, I don't know what this is. It's pretty neutral, but it'll be fun to see what's going to happen here. And I think that's part of what that structure does. I think it allows us to have, I know when we first started sparring with students, when they would first start, we would have them practice on a heavy bag where they would go in to a certain distance and pull it every time, so they could do that. And we required them to spar without contact and pull all their punches at 6 inches. Now, we didn't allow them to be full out at 6 inches. They had to be at the right place where if they completed, they would make a really good solid blow and with good follow through. And so we started with that. And then we moved to 2 inches. And then we moved to where they could, with whatever equipment we needed to, do contact. But we started with a framework for that that allowed them to feel safe and to be safe. And in our tests, for example, when we were going flat out, when you got into the upper belts and they were doing flat out on defenses or whatever, one of the things that we were very clear is if you do something and it looks like somebody's going to get seriously hurt here, you stop it. You're responsible for stopping that. And if you don't, we will flunk you. We'll give you a second chance. That's not the issue. But if you're getting ready to do something, you realize you're getting ready to throw this person head over heels onto the floor and off the mat, we expect you to stop that throw. That's what we want to have happen. Because I think that's part of that structure and safety. And it gives you a place to go flat out in a way, to get those fear emotions out, to get the anger emotions out, and learn how to put them under control and not be afraid of them. One of the interesting things is that fear replicates itself. It gets into a loop where it starts just making it worse and worse, and anger gets worse and worse. And so one of the things that I think working through those defenses, working through the katas, working through all those sorts of things does for us is it allows us to get that anger out, to put it out there, but to learn how to control it in a situation that's a safe, controlled environment. And then we become more comfortable with ourselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I had a chance to look up the word for dojo. So it's Dao Chang, it's the place or venue of the way.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the way, of course, is the way of life and the way of peace and the way of functioning in life. It's a, books have been written on this topic and what is the way and lifestyle, etc. And a compromised lifestyle, which we all live in, and we all have challenges throughout the day that compromise our integrity and our peace, etc. Traffic jams and nonsense, our own body not working, mind not working. You mentioned your eyes. There are constant challenges thrown at us, and they affect they have the very potential to affect our behavior. If we've got, I tell people that you start out with one problem. Okay, you can handle one problem, but when you've got 5 things going wrong,
Yeah.
now you're really in this defensive position and maybe ornery and complaining and ready to revolt type of a situation. And that's why I tell people the idea for me is really, it's not becoming a super athlete, it's becoming a balanced wellness athlete.
Yes.
So I can do my things and I can sustain them. And I realize what the aging process is. It's a constant change and adaptation. Bruce Lee once asked his students, this is a great story. My martial arts teacher in Spain gave me this for a week. What did Bruce say was the secret of life? And every day I would come back with a new thing. And it's this, it's that. And he said, no. And he finally gave me the answer. He said, it's adaptability. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe share with the listeners what are some thoughts about lifestyle and the way and being adaptive to the changing things that we see in our own aging process and the events in our lives.
One thing, a story I heard, and this really factors into anything from what you mentioned, Sifu, with the traffic and all that, and with the changing in our lives. There was a woman that wrote an autobiographical story of her going across Australia with camels, that she was doing this trek with camels, at any rate. And she got lost. And she ran into one of the Aboriginal peoples there. I don't know which tribe they were from. And she talked to the man, and he was trying to explain to her where she needed to go. But it's a fairly flat area and not a whole lot of things that she would notice what they were. And he just said to her, he was going the opposite direction she was. And he said, well, you need to go off this way, which is about 45 degrees off from where he was headed. And he said, well, I will take you there. And she said, well, how far is it? He said, about 3 days. And she said, oh, well, I couldn't ask you to do that. You were headed back to your home village. She said, that's 3 days out of your way. And he looked at her totally puzzled and said, well, yes, but I'll still be alive, won't I? And I thought, now
Beautiful.
that's a fascinating way of looking at life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sit in the traffic there, and I was in traffic this morning. And I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, here we go. We just sat there and sat there and sat there. But it was like, well, I'm sitting here with my wife. I'm still alive. I'm happy. There's no accident. What would I be upset about? It was just, this is the way it is. Accept it, move on. I was seriously injured in my 50s. And that did me more damage than any injury I had in my 20s or anything else. And my martial arts background saved me from either dying or being a quadriplegic or whatever. But I paid a price. I have all 5 of my lumbar collapsed and off to one side, and the 5 lower cervical are that way. And I can't even sit on a mat and do a roll anymore. I mean, I try and do a back roll, and it's actually a back splat because nothing rolls. It just boom. I don't do shoulder rolls. I can't do them anymore, and I love to fall. So I miss that. I really do. But that's okay. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm happy. I have my wife, my children, my grandchildren. I've got a good life. And by that, for those that don't quite catch it yet, that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of problems in my life. It just means I've got a good life. It's life. I'm here. I went through 6 or 8 years of severe pain and just sat all day long. I couldn't move. And 12 hours a day, I would sit there. And if I had to get up, I had to plan, okay, I will go here to go to the bathroom here. This will be the most efficient way to do this. And it was all because the back was hurting so badly, nothing they could do. And then I was sent to one specialist who looked at me and immediately said, "Oh, it's not your back, it's your left hip." And I said, "Well, that doesn't hurt." He said, "Of course not. Everything else is hurting, trying to keep it from hurting." And they did x-rays, and I had 5 bone spurs, no cartilage, just all kinds of stuff. And he said, "You need a hip replacement." And my immediate response was, "Where do I sign up?" Because I knew that was going to cause me trouble and pain, but there was hope on the other side of it. That I didn't want to sit as an invalid the rest of my life. If I could not do anything else, okay, I will adapt to it. But by God, I'm going to take this chance. And they did a hip replacement. It took several years for me to begin to get back. I had to have a knee replacement. I've had several other surgeries since then. They had to replace a bone out of my hand. I mean, I've had a lot of stuff go on from all the stuff I did when I was young. But it's a question of just gratitude for life. I'm glad to be here. I have some good friends that didn't make it this far. Some from cancer. I lost a couple good friends to violence, to war. I could have been killed numerous times in my life, and I've made it out. And I'm just grateful to be here. And I would love to be here another 10 or 20 years, but I'm 74. I have no idea what that's going to bring. And I will accept what comes, but I will make the best of what comes. And I think that's part of one of the things I was trained in intelligence work. You observe, you observe whatever's going on, you analyze it, you adapt, and you overcome. And that's kind of how I see doing life. Is we're aging, okay? So I'm 74. We had a motorcycle. We sold it a while back because we just said, our reflexes aren't as good as they used to be. Neither one of us can drive it as safely. But then when my eye went, we said, okay, that's the last thing now. This is the time to give it up and to be grateful for the time that I had it. But I also know that will potentially allow me to have a lot more years instead of winding up putting in a ditch somewhere. But also there's a sense of responsibility. If I can't drive it safely, I could harm someone else. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I want to do what I can do to help people. I've had some people ask me why I'm still wearing a mask. And they say, "Are you," when I go into public areas, and they say, "Aren't you vaccinated?" "Oh yeah, I'm fully vaccinated." But you can still be sick. We know that 10% of the people with COVID don't even know they have it, or they find out later on. And for me, we know that a mask is 4 times more effective from you spreading it to someone else than it is from you getting it from someone else. And so from my point of view, I wear a mask because if in doing that, I can protect you, why wouldn't I? I've put my life on the line a number of times for people, and where I literally could have been killed in the process. But so what's wearing a mask? That's minimal.
Wonderful. So, Sensei, share with us your website, if you would.
It's senseiu.org. SENSEIU for university, u.org. And it's something I started 2 years ago, and then all this health stuff started. So it's not completely finished, but it's gotten a start there. And the point is to become, the goal of it is to be a one-stop shop for martial arts instructors, self-protection instructors, and so on, who to find the skills and knowledge that they need to teach people to become warriors, people who will stand on the boundary line, who do not want to fight, would choose not to fight. But if it comes down to protecting a victim, then they will stand on the boundary line. And they understand that I may die today, and if so, I will make it a good death. You know, and it's a good day to die. That's the goal of it, is to provide those kinds of skills. And I have 2 books that are out already. Sundays in the Dojo, which is a story form of a young man dealing with PTSD and struggling with it. And in the midst, he winds up having to kill 2 people to protect someone. And then that just sets everything off, and how he comes to grips with the PTSD. The second one is called The Warrior's Codex. And it's over 70 sayings about being a warrior. Like, fear is a great servant, but a terrible master. And it's just stuff for people to think about, and to have these thoughts of, oh, that's something, yeah, let me think how that would apply to my life. And then the last one is this book that's coming out shortly, assuming I don't have any more of these health issues pop up, of which is Beyond Technique in the Dojo. And it's the art of training warriors. And that's 6 courses. It's one on learning about anger and fear. We tell people, don't, get your fear, don't be afraid, don't get angry, don't do this, don't do this. And it's like, well, what is anger? How does it work? And I explain it physiologically, what to do about it, how to do it, and so on. It has on Fasttrack meditation. It has on basic teaching skills, just in general, of how to do things. One course on verbal de-escalation. That's one of the courses there. So there's, and also one of the courses on violence, know your enemy, who's who, and so on. So that's the goal now. That's become my dojo. I can no longer teach physically. So now what I want to do is help people be able to teach those inner skills, those inner things that people need to be a warrior. To me, a warrior is one that stands on the boundary line and will not run. That to me is a critical issue. I have a friend who was a former Navy SEAL, and he was in a bar drinking with some friends, and this guy started beating his girlfriend, just slugging his own girlfriend. And my friend looked up and said, "Stop it." He says, "What'd you say?" I said, "Stop it." So he comes over and he's yelling. He's a young guy, comes over to my friend. The young guy comes over to my friend, and he's yelling at one thing and another. And my friend's just sitting here drinking his beer, going on because he's just bored. It's like, I don't want to do this, but quit beating your girlfriend. And the guy said, "Well," and he said, "Go away, kid. You're boring me. Just don't beat your girlfriend." And the kid says, "Well, I'll beat you." And about 2 or 3 of his friends grabbed him and pulled him out, going, "Listen, this is somebody you don't want to mess with." And he didn't understand at the point, but what they understood was, if this guy's sitting here drinking his beer and is bored with what's going on, you do not want to start a fight with this guy. But that's, to me, part of that inner skill that you develop, that you have this, you will stand on the boundary line. But it's not a James Bond flamboyant out there. It's just, if I have to do this, I will do this. This is where I am. It's your call. You want to take it further? We take it further.
Sensei Don, what do you think about another discussion perhaps in January? There are a lot of topics I wanted to touch on today, and we're out of time for today. So would you be open for another discussion?
Oh, absolutely. I would enjoy it very much, Sifu.
Wonderful. I'm going to go be a peaceful warrior, and laugh at my inadequacies and the chaos of life, and chuckle and be peaceful and hug a few enemies. How about that?
Sounds good. And let me give you the warrior's blessing. Go now in peace. But if someone should keep you from doing that, may you live the next few moments well.
There we have it. So Sifu Slim at sifuslim.com. Happy to have been with Sensei Don Lewis today, and we'll look for your likes and your questions down below, and we'll be back to you in a few months with another episode of this heartfelt conversation. Till then, big aloha, chai jin, joy gin, oyasumi nasai.
Thank you.